Hi there, I'm Jenny Kirk, and with me, as always, is Zoe Kirk Robinson.
Hello.
And today we're going to be revisiting Sci-Fi Chat. Now, this is a series that we started quite a while ago, and we kind of let slip because we got so busy with other things. But we're back now, bigger, badder, hotter than before. Actually, not too hot, but we've got a few topics now we're going to talk about, and this is a general sci-fi theme that permeates through it. But what have you got for us today?
Well, our first one is one that you decided we wanted to talk about, and it's sci-fi themes in games.
Yeah, and the ones that always spring to mind to me are games like Syndicate.
Okay.
It's a childhood memory of playing the Bullfrog game Syndicate on an Amiga, although I believe it was available on various other formats, SNES, Mega Drive.
Personally, I played it on PC.
Yeah, it's about the era where the PC
Was better than the Amiga.
Yeah, certainly in the early days, the Amiga had much better graphics and sounds, but
the Amiga was designed for graphics and sound and manipulating video and things like that. It was one of those systems that was dedicated to that and then expanded outward into games.
Yeah. But it's something that you've got to remember that the Amiga was kind of an 80s computer that was so far in advance of the others that it held its own into the 90s. But we're not here to talk about the merits of the Amiga, are we now? Nerdside represent.
I could talk about it all day, especially how the PC beat it by Commodore resting on their laurels. But go ahead, do you want to talk about Syndicate?
Yeah, the thing about Syndicate that I liked is kind of this dystopian vision of the future. And it's a theme that runs through sci-fi. You know, when you look at a lot of sci-fi writing, and I suppose it's born out of, you trace it way back, people like George Orwell, 1984, or A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. It's that dystopian, authoritative world where the odds are always stacked against you and arbitrary reasons are used to rule against you. But then there's other games as well, like you've been playing a lot of Flashback.
I have. I do enjoy Flashback an awful lot. It's one of my favourite games from the 90s. When I was a kid and I had my Mega PC, I would play very few games on the Mega Drive set because I didn't have any. But my friend had a copy of Flashback and I used to borrow that. And I played it through to completion several times, and it's a good, fun game. And I think a lot of that is the world that it builds in the game.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people look back to these games with a certain degree of fondness, because it's world building. It created this inspirational land, universe, within which you could find yourself actually in your mind constructing stories. And I know that certainly with Syndicate, it was very inspirational towards a lot of the stuff I then later went on to write. And certainly people of our generation, if you ask, what made you write the things that you do, quite often computer games are probably now starting to get cited as big an inspiration as other authors.
So we've talked about two cyberpunk games, essentially. Syndicate is definite cyberpunk. It's got corporate rulers of the world and it's dystopian. Flashback, to a similar extent, appears to be a corporate-run world with a dystopian setting, and alien invasion as well. So it's not quite cyberpunk, but it's very close to it. What other sci-fi settings do you remember being prominent in games?
I remember playing Turrican 2 quite well, but that seemed to be quite heavily inspired by the Alien franchise. And then Shadow of the Beast 2 had more of a, I suppose, like medieval punk feel to it.
So that would be like a science fantasy, mixing sci-fi and fantasy?
Yeah, Shadow of the Beast 2. I'm assuming that there was a Turrican 1 and a Shadow of the Beast 1, but I never played
I never played Shadow of the Beast 2.
It was, even to this day I can remember that the cheat for infinite invulnerability was you typed in 10 pints and it would give the message on screen, I'll drink to that, and then you were invulnerable, nothing could kill you.
Wow.
The little things that you remember, like the cheat codes for certain games. I remember Railroad Tycoon. Shift and the dollar, basically type dollar. So Shift 4, which gave you the dollar symbol, gave you money. I mean, who knew?
Well, you did.
Yeah, but only on a certain map. You couldn't do it on any map. But no, we're straying there. But where do you put in things like film tie-in games? There was a Batman game. There was Back to the Future game. So Back to the Future Part 2. And also Blade Runner as well. That was one of the most monumentally impressive computer games of that era. Was Blade Runner, the 4-disc version.
For the most part, I would say that a genre to itself is the film tie-in in terms of games, because they always model the type of game that's popular at the time.
Yeah.
So in the 8-bit era, it used to be a side-scrolling beat-em-up, regardless of what film they were actually basing themselves off. And then later on, it became a standard third-person action-adventure was the standard. So film tie-in for me would be a genre to itself rather than just sci-fi.
Okay. Well,
but there is one that stands out from that, and that's Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly a point-and-click adventure more than anything else. And it has very obvious cyberpunk themes.
Well, yeah, but it's based back to the film, which in turn is based on... well, certainly Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but there's also visually it borrows a lot, in my opinion, from Frederick Pohl's The Space Merchants.
The Space Merchants is something you brought up a few times. I've never read it, but you seem very enamoured with it.
Yeah, and this kind of brings the sci-fi chat element away from games back to books. That there's, games are probably a lot inspired by film and books, and certainly Blade Runner, the film, I think it drew a lot from this book, The Space Merchants. And when you read The Space Merchants, a lot of that, a chance to begin again in the outer colonies, and that's all drawn from The Space Merchants, that iconography.
Yes, but it is a major factor in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep as well. The broadcasts that are telling the truth about what's going on in the world in the book are not necessarily coming from Earth, but they're being broadcast to all of the planets that have been colonised.
Yeah, but there's other things as well. A lot of the cyberpunk element is not in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
No, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is a standard dystopia.
But there's a much more of a feel of that, almost like a cyberpunk future within The Space Merchants. That's what I thought.
So you'd say it was more proto-cyberpunk?
Yeah, because I think it's a book from the 60s, early 70s.
I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but yeah, it's definitely older than cyberpunk, because cyberpunk basically starts with William Gibson and Neuromancer, which is just on the shelf.
Yes, all hail the Gibson. but yeah.
Right.
Do you need to move on to the next topic?
I think there is one more thing I want to say about sci-fi in games. Are there any optimistic sci-fi settings in games that aren't Star Trek?
Well, I mean, you could argue that... I'm going to throw two wild cards at you. Alpha Centauri, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, because effectively you make your own future.
Agreed.
And in a similar vein, Gremlin Games is Utopia.
So your argument would be the only way that there's an optimistic future outside of a Star Trek game is when you make that future yourself.
By and large, yes. I mean, I'm racking my brains, and a sort of a happy, clappy, smells and bells futuristic game. I'm actually struggling to name one.
So am I. Now that you mention it, so am I. Even the Doctor Who ones are a bit off.
Yeah, I think dystopia sells.
It's certainly a better way of getting conflict, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Certainly an easier way of getting conflict. I'm not convinced it's necessarily better.